Once we were near Mayapur. We had an old, I think it was a 48 Hudson or some old car, big car, but old. And I was driving, and we had gone up, left the main road. If you've been on the main road, you know how bad that is. You can imagine what this secondary road was like. Because we were going up to Birnagar to visit Lalit Prasad, who was Bhakisiddhanta's brother, living brother. When a very old man then, but we didn't know the road, we didn't know the way very well. We knew that it was up that road somewhere. And we drove halfway up or so, and we came to a place, there was a cement bridge over a big gully, but the water, monsoon runoff had washed the bank away on both sides of the bridge for a distance of about 3 or 4 feet, as I recall. This may be an exaggeration, but it was some distance, maybe 3 feet. And we could see up and down this canal that there was no other way for the automobile to cross, and we still had 5 or 6 kilometers at least to go. So Prabhupada studied the situation. He didn't even get out of the car, he just studied the situation a little bit. Ramananda and some of the other big guys in back, Bhavananda, somebody else, he said, "You boys get out. Shyamasundar, you back up and get going very fast, and we will make it." I got back at 50 feet or so and just gunned that old tank, and off we went. Whoa! We flew over that first gap, screaming across that cement bridge. Whoa! Flying. It looked like a Steve McQueen Great Escape movie. And the boys walked down around and got back in, and off we went. Expert at everything. Engineer also. He always used to know everything about engineering. He used to make drawings. In fact, it may not be well known how early the Mayapur project was actually started, long before what they're saying in their chronology. Back in, right after Tamal, or somebody got that first little tiny few bighas of land in Mayapur, Prabhupada planned the whole thing out one day in London, the very place, and sketched it all out, the temples and the buildings. And he asked me if there was any English devotees that were architects or knew anything. There was one, Ranchor. He called Ranchor up, and Narayan was there, the builder. So he had them come up, and he submitted this idea to them and says, "We have only a few days till I must leave. I want you to work on a plan for a huge complex at Mayapur." And that's all he thought about for days. And this must have been 71 or 2. And we'd walk in the park in Russell Square every morning then, and he would point to different buildings, and he would ask Ranchor and Narayan questions. He knew the answers already, but he would ask, testing their abilities. And expert at everything. That was Prabhupada. And yet, there was for all of this vitality and excitement and adventurism and dynamic vibration around Prabhupada, there was an ineffable air of shell, almost like of softness. You felt it when you got within a foot or two of Prabhupada's actual physical body, that it was cooler and it was soft. There was some kind of a soft cushion there. I know others who have probably massaged him and served him have felt that also. It was like entering an air-conditioned room. It was totally calm around his body, in a halo. He was one of the other qualifications of a saint is silence. Sometimes Prabhupada would, I swear, he would talk to me and not open his mouth. I'd look up, and he'd just be looking at me. And I would have heard a full conversation in my head. Sometimes I was writing letters. This happened many times. I always had the feeling something else was guiding my hand when I was typing these letters for Prabhupada. I could hear his words ringing in my ears. I could type them with my eyes closed, and everything would be all right. They came out just perfect. There would be someone who would ask a strange question or an esoteric question from some scripture which I had no clue about. And I just let my mind go, and Prabhupada would throw the answer in there. And I always, I'd check it back with him, I'd run it through for him, and he'd sign it. Prabhupada was so expert that he expanded himself. In fact, probably the greatest area of his expertise was his ability to manage. I mean, it has to be seen in context what Prabhupada did. From a single individual with absolutely no resources, and just his words, he was able to build a worldwide society of people, global society, long before what we're calling the age of globalization, which is right now. This was long before, when we couldn't even find videotapes or cassette tapes, even the old cassette cartridges, anywhere else in the world but America. We used to have to wait in line at the post office in Bombay for 2 days to make a long-distance call, if we were lucky. Forget about communication. Forget about any of this. And yet Prabhupada had a worldwide organization in 3 or 4 years built up. How he managed this should be studied. But I was fortunate to be there right at the most exciting time when all of this really kind of hit the fan, and Prabhupada came up with this idea. He called me, and he was becoming overburdened with his management and was complaining about not having time to translate because we had no books either during these early days. We only finally got Bhagavad Gita years after we met Prabhupada. And nothing to distribute. So Prabhupada had a twofold task. He had to keep us all organized somehow, plus he had to provide us with the books. Imagine. And so in order to provide himself with the time to translate, he came up with this idea of a GBC, a governing body commission. He called me in early one morning. And this idea sprang from his head, full-blown, like he'd probably been thinking about it for a long time, and sleepless nights. I never saw him sleep, so I'm sure that he was working on these managerial problems during that time. And he said, Shyamasundar, take dictation. Henceforth I want to govern the society this way. And you write it down and send copies of this out to the various leaders whom I shall appoint. His idea was, at that time and forevermore, to divide the world into 12 zones. And that each of these zones would be managed by one person, and that person would be a householder or someone who had business experience. Tamal Krishna Goswami was the one exception at the time because he had just taken sannyas very recently, and Prabhupada allowed him to be the GBC for India because he was the only qualified man at the time. There were no Indian devotees had yet come up. So he wanted householders, managers, businessmen to run his society and manage all the business affairs. And the sannyasis should be free and should roam from zone to zone, wherever their feet would take them, and preach, period. Now I think those two functions have gotten intermixed and diluted. I know Prabhupada's original intent, and it was not to change. That was it. And he even said, he sent a letter out to the 12 GBC men. He said, but this shall be a democracy, and if there are matters that affect the whole society, then you shall all vote. And the unanimous, because we are a democracy, the unanimous vote will hold. And if there's a deadlock, I will throw the remaining vote. But only if it's a grievous error. Somebody must have a copy of that original. It's in the Veda base, the original letter like that.
You see that?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,